Morning, everyone. We are doing another episode of Ezekiel's Art Podcast, episode 21. And today my guest is Chanel Glenn, and I'm.
So why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Chanel Glenn. Artist name is Chanel Simone. I am a full-time artist here located in Atlanta, Georgia, originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
So what kind of art do you do?
I am primarily a acrylic painter, but my foundation is drawing. I do like to still draw with charcoal, pencils, pastels, chalk pastels and things like that. But primarily now, I'm really heavy in acrylics and painting. That's what I've been doing for like the past 7 years.
Nice. So you've been doing art for a really long time.
Yes, I have. I've been drawing all my life actually since I was a kid. My childhood dream was to be a cartoonist.
It definitely shows in your art the level of excellence. So like, because I was looking through it, I was like blown away. I was like, whoa. When I was trying to look through it this morning to make sure that I was looking at the right profile, I ended up inviting the wrong person on a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh no.
Oh, wow.
So trying to get everything set. But sorry for the tangent. Caffeine is kicking in, and I'm still waking up.
Okay.
So can you take us through the adventure of your art, of how you started out? You mentioned that you started as a child, but how did that develop as something that you do as
As full time today.
Mhm.
So like I mentioned, I've always been into art and always into drawing and heavy into cartoons and animation. I'm a big dreamer, and I like the idea that with art and cartoons, that's kind of limitless. There's really not a budget. The only budget is your imagination. Um, and so that was kind of how I started into it. And I took a couple classes in high school, and that's where I kind of learned how to paint and some of the tricks of the trade, because I was just strictly into drawing with pencil and shading, and that was like it for me. Like I enjoyed coloring, but I sucked at colored pencils, and crayons were okay, but they just felt elementary. So I just kind of stuck to drawing until I took those classes. So then fast forward into college or coming out of college, my best friend asked me to host a paint sip for her. And this is when paint and sips were just starting to become a thing and become popular. That's where, people get together, they get drunk, and you teach them how to paint something simple, basically. Or they'll just paint, something that's outlined. And so I didn't paint at the time. And I was like, hey, girl, I don't paint. And she was like, yeah, but, you're artsy and you can, figure it out, do it for me, you love me. I said, okay. So that was the first time I really had, like, tried to paint, like, seriously outside of, like, high school. And this had been about a 6-year gap between high school and the time that she asked me. And so I wound up enjoying the process. It felt therapeutic. I posted something on social media. I did it again. She didn't have the party. Anyway, I wanted to get canceled, but I really enjoyed it. So I painted a couple more times, posted it on social media, and asked my Facebook friends, like, hey, if I started selling artwork, or selling my paintings, like, basically, would you buy this? And they were like, yeah. So that's pretty much how the painting started. So I was still kind of nervous from that at that point, but I started to kind of reteach myself some of the things, or remember the things I had learned in high school as far as painting is concerned. But before that, I forgot to mention too, with drawing, I started doing portraits of people. And that's kind of how I became a professional artist before the painting, as far as selling my artwork. So I would do charcoal portraits and drawings for people, just self-portraits, drawings of their kids. I would do portraits of people at my job for Employee of the Month. And so, like, that was my way of, like, trying to get back into practicing. So once I got into painting, because it's like a different ball game as far as how you mix it and stuff like that, and I started enjoying it, I just kind of kept perfecting my craft, and here we are today.
Wow, that is awesome. So as someone that is currently trying to work on getting better at doing portraits, what is the best shortcut that you've found? Or are there any shortcuts to doing portraits to make something look good, but also not take longer than you have to for a piece?
So shortcuts. I'm gonna say something that it's let me see. So art is subjective, right? It really is. First, you have to decide the type of artist that you want to be. So if you're really focused on portraits and like being surreal and being true to that person, a couple of shortcuts you can do are grid lines to kind of help you get the proportions right. Because for me, I used to struggle with that with portraits. I would always make them too big for the paper, and it would like come off the paper. And it was cool, but it wasn't really what I wanted. So
Mm-hmm.
I learned grid lines from school. And then once I got comfortable with the grid lines and really focusing on certain parts of the face, eventually I elevated to doing murals. And when I started doing murals, that's when I discovered projectors. Come to find out, a lot of artists actually use projectors. And people will think that it's taboo or frowned upon because they're considered like, okay, you're tracing. And yes, drawing is a big part of art, being able to look at something and draw it nakedly. But when you get into painting, and really genuinely blending and things like that, that is where the real skill comes in. Because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
tracing and outlining stuff is one thing, but once you're able to add the layers and apply the colors, it's another thing. So I would say that graduating, and I say graduating to a projector would be an easy shortcut. That's where I'm at in my career. And again, I've been painting for about eight years now, and I just started using one maybe within the last 12 months. And that was, you know, because I had my feelings about it as well, but I didn't really get into it until I got to murals and the spaces were larger, and I had to start doing, you know, outlining and drawing my own things, you know. So sometimes I'll use it, you know, I may draw something smaller, blow it up, use the projector for that. But with the projector, it'll take the focus off of worrying about it being proportionally correct. You can focus more on the actual painting when it comes to the
Mm-hmm.
portrait and the skill. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, when I was growing up, my dad would like use a projector, and I always thought, I was like, I don't know, is that kind of cheating? And then he just was like, no, just the hardest part is the shading. And then I think, if I remember correctly, one time he showed me by like, he traced out a little thing for me, and then he filled in one. And then he showed me, he's like, okay, here's your shading, here's my shading. Look at the difference. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same shape, same outline, but this is where it makes it look realistic. It's not about the outline. You can get that proportionate, that's great, but that's not where the hard part comes in.
Right, exactly. And it's like once you understand that, then you're able to get past the use of projectors and things like that and be realistic with yourself. It's about working smarter and not harder, but still giving
Yeah.
yourself the credit. Because I mean, you think about other professions, you know, like especially with AI now and like coding and things like that, and even when the internet, you want to take it back to that point. You know what I'm saying? People were relying on the technology to make their jobs easier, but they're still doing the job because it still requires certain skill and expertise. So I feel it's the same when it comes to using a projector in art or painting rather.
Yeah, I agree. So I know AI art can be a little bit of a touchy subject for some people, and some artists, but I since it's a thing that we have to deal with now. What do you think about it?
I'm not a fan of it, to be honest. I mean, I like at first it was cool the concept. When I say at first, I mean like literally the first 24 hours of it being a thing. The concept of being able to see yourself in ways that you only imagine in your mind, you know, I feel like that's cool because a lot of people, you know, they never get to see themselves in that type of light because a lot of the AI images were like, you know, of like kings and they gave people kind of like this deity type of feel and figure. You know what I'm saying? So that was
Hmm.
cool from that perspective. But no, I think it definitely takes away from the work that real artists do, especially digital artists. And I just started getting into digital art myself with my iPad and trying to dabble into that because I do some client work with logos and t-shirt designs, but I want to get into illustration because again, you know, making cartoons and just digital art being quicker, you know what I mean? And even understanding, because I used to think digital art was cheating too. And I tried it and it was like, it's not. Because just the way you blend things and understanding, like again, it takes skill and knowledge to do. And I think it's heavily underestimated. So knowing all those things, I'm not a fan of AI art at all. And I mean, they're using it for so many other things that aren't just art now. It's like now they're making it you know, art like you're using it as models. You know what I'm saying? It's taking style of real life people. They don't have to talk, but there are people that are paying for AI models, and that's crazy to me to think about. But it is what it is. I also feel like, not to get too deep, but I don't trust them getting all that information on us, like pictures and stuff. I felt like that was automatically sketchy. Like, I'm not gonna give you my likeness to like make some copies. People already think that there are clones and stuff out there. Like, I don't know if they
For real.
clones are a real thing, but I'm not about to give you no, I'm not doing that.
I mean, you could have an identity clone, just someone that just steals your information and then just buys a bunch of crap online.
Exactly.
And and then you're screwed.
Yeah.
I heard I don't know if this is true. This is something I heard, but they found certain medical records of people being accidentally like used in some of the AI art. But this was like in the early stages of it. So because it was just crawling through the internet and just learning from all the different images indiscriminately, whether it's private stuff or not. So it's like that's a huge issue for me right there. It's like, oh, like, got to stay out of other people's work, because like the whole idea of AI art, it's like everything is literally just patchwork other people's art. It's nothing truly new. You're stealing from other people's already made images that are on there. Like, I understand the aspect of copying for like, derivative work, but there's that, and then there's like stepping over copyright law at that point, And so that's what kind of like worries me a bit, like how much stuff is going to be like forged once it gets really good.
But a lot of those things have fine print that people don't read. You agree to things, they just see the trend and they hop on it, especially the kids and teenagers, and they have no idea that they're giving away, the rights to do what they want to do with that information.
Yeah, because it's a lot easier just to hit continue and next because you want to start using the app, which I'm guilty of myself. Just like, for years, like, I didn't think about it until relatively recently.
Yeah.
With all the, how our world has evolved into like almost this cyberpunk type universe now.
Right.
So it's like, man, what's coming next? But that's way off topic of art. But so I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite subject to paint?
So my favorite subject to paint, I have two parts. The answer has two parts. So I identify with everything that I paint personally. I am an emotional painter, and that is what drives me. Emotions primarily, and love being the strongest emotion. I see myself in everything I paint, and oftentimes people ask me if the paintings are of me, even though they're not. They just can feel that energy. So I'm going to say, in a way, it's me, because the things I choose to paint represent where I'm at that point in my life and the emotion that I'm going through. So I always identify with that. And then my second answer to that is people and women primarily. Not just women, but I like to paint strangers. It sounds weird, but I really enjoy highlighting the beauty in regular people. Sometimes I do pick, kind of like Model-esque things. Again, if I identify with that photograph or that pose or that moment, because I'm emotionally driven. But again, being that I connect with a lot of these paintings, and I am a woman, it just makes sense that I enjoy painting women. A lot of people like painting women too, because there are curves, that come with dealing with a woman, and you can kind of like be dramatic with those things and still be artistic. But I just enjoy highlighting regular people, and just the joy when they realize that they've been chosen to be a muse and they're just living their life. Because I would think it would be super cool if I was just minding my business and somebody just randomly tagged me in something like, oh, I painted you, I drew you, like something about this resonated with me. And I know people feel like, oh, you gotta ask for permission, and I do sometimes, but depending on the nature of it, I'll just kind of do it.
So what are some of the themes that pop up through your art?
So like I mentioned, love. Love is a heavy theme because I am an emotional person. I love love. I love relationships. I love happiness. And I've trusted a lot of people. So between love and heartbreak, those things will kind of be common themes. And also like what's what I'm looking for. Um, Kind of like a single subject matter, like one person or thing, in like a larger than life type of feel as well. Like I like to make um, my muses kind of seem bigger than the backgrounds. Like you'll see behind me, I got this person that seems pretty tall. She's like a skyscraper. I got this other painting of these trees that are like in space, and they're large. I like space a lot as well. I do have an affinity for space, and so that's been a theme throughout my art career. I've sold a lot of paintings that have been space backgrounds, space themed backgrounds. I just like the wonder and the freedom of it, the mystery.
I love your style, and it seems very unique. It is. Did you draw inspiration from any other artists, or is this something that just kind of evolved through ever since you were a child?
Actually, yeah, the latter. It evolved from since I was a child. I was never really big into studying artists, even though that's like something that they kind of, force you to do. They introduce you to the typical artists that we all know of, the Van Goghs and things like that, the Basquiat's. But I never really had much of an interest in. I'm not really a history person. Like, like I care about it, but I feel like art is still so unique to you as a person. So I never really understood studying another artist. Now that I'm further in my career, I do understand that because different artists have different techniques, especially with social media now. You can see the different styles and ways people do things. And sometimes, I'll pick something to paint like, oh, I like these colors. It may be fun to blend, or I want to challenge myself to see if I can do that. And then, of course, every time I paint, I'm teaching myself something. So it's trial and error. And I may be like, oh, let me go to this artist page and see how they did this part. So from that aspect, there are people that I study, but not past artists. I believe that there are so many amazing artists that are alive now. You know what I'm saying? And it is unfortunate that a lot of artists don't reach their fame until they pass in the notoriety. But there are so many people right now that are doing amazing things that when I do study and look at things, I'm looking at them. Even though being in the art world, you may still have the collectors and people that still stick to that. They ask you questions about the greats and seeing if you do know those things. But I didn't go to formal art school, so it's like we can just talk about regular artists, or not regular but current artists.
That's awesome. I love it when I meet artists where their style is just a part of who they are. It's really really fun to see how it expresses itself so differently between each artist.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a little bit weird of a question. So how long did it take from when you first started painting to when you felt like you're like, I got a handle on this now?
Let me see. I am a quick learner, and I believe that like most things, you have to practice, but not practice consistently, because you can restart. You can start and stop. It's like working out. You know what I mean? Like you work out for a week, you take a month off and get back. Like you're still working out, but you're not advancing like you could be if because you're not doing it consistently. And so I would say, I don't know, because I still feel like there are still so many things I want to learn and get better at and perfect and work on. So maybe like 6 months. It's hard to say because when I started painting like until like the last year and a half, it was on the side. I had a full-time job. I was a single mom, so I would like paint at nights and weekends, and like sometimes I would take long breaks, and so it's like that's kind of why I started off with saying what I said. So I mean, it's kind of hard to gauge, but I would say maybe like 6 months to a year before I felt like, okay. And that really came from other people and like going to shows and, you know, my community, because, you know, they like my art and they were willing to support me. And when I sold my first painting, that's when I was like, okay, like, yeah, like people like this stuff. And even still looking back now, I'm like, ooh. Personally at the first painting. But again, art is subjective, so it's like I'm not super harsh on myself, because I've seen, you know, it's like music and stuff like that. Once you get to a certain level, people just they don't care what you do. Just the fact that you did it, people want it. You know, you go to art museums and look at some art, you get real close to it. It's just like lines and dots. You back up, but it may see something or whatever it may be. So like from that perspective, you know, I'm like, okay, I did it all right. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how some people have like an affinity for it. Some people it takes a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell from your art that you definitely put in a lot of practice. Is there any type of exercises that really helped you advance quicker?
So I just remembered again some of the exercises that we did in high school and around social media. So like I mentioned, I was doing the portraits for Employee of the Month for my job. I used to work in TV. And so that helped because that was consistent with me doing it, and it was timed. You know, I used to do them at work on the clock, so it's not like we were there for hours. I'm a pretty impatient artist, so some paintings take really long, but a lot of my stuff doesn't take as long as you would think it would, or as you would imagine. So some of the things that I've done, we had this thing called blind couture, which is like it's like where you draw what's in front of you and you can't look down at the paper. You got to stay focused on the subject, and then you don't pick your pencil up or your pen up as well. And what that does is that teaches you how to trust yourself when it comes to sketching and things like that. Because again, a lot of people, when it comes to painting, the sketch is important, but you don't want to spend like way too much time on that if you still have to paint and apply the layers. Also knowing that you're going to paint over the lines and things like that anyway. So it's like trying to find that balance. So I feel like the blind contour teaches you like to trust yourself and that you'll have a good outline or a good sketch to start from, while not focusing on it, keeping it rough, keeping it light. And some people use that as an art style. You know what I mean? That type of style as well. And then like doing the little fun challenges on social media, like how they had like the Inktober and stuff like that, where they're like, oh, draw this every day or paint this. But I like drawing with a pen and marker as well. Again, trying to teaching myself to trust myself, and just doing rough sketches. You know what I mean? And not being so hard on myself. I'm a perfectionist. And so a lot of times when I paint, like when I'm going to paint something, like I want this to be the final thing. But it's like you can buy more canvases, you can buy more sketchbooks. So I'm really just trying to get my ideas out when I have them so I don't forget them. Just practice sketching things, you know, maybe for 30 minutes a day, just random things, just to get comfortable with trusting myself so I can spend more time when actually painting.
Okay. So when you're doing sketches, so you're doing like mini still life pretty much as like exercises?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much. We're just drawing portraits or photographs of people. Since I like to draw portraits more than anything, I like to draw portraits and hands. Most people don't like to draw hands. I'm that weird person. That's really a thing. Like I was the kid that would draw people's hands in elementary school. Like draw my hands. It looked like, you know, little sticks, and I would come through and do it. But yeah, I love drawing a good hand.
I like drawing hands when it comes out looking right. And if it's slightly off, I'm like, man, I don't want this. But what was I gonna say? Sorry, I lost track of my thought. I had a couple questions for you.
No, it's okay.
So when do ideas seem to pop into your head?
So it's funny. I feel like, I don't know if this is true for most artists, but they always pop in my head at probably I don't want to say the worst times, but times when I'm not like in the studio, like if I'm driving my car or at work, like I'm supposed to be on the clock doing something else. And that's part of the reason, that's really the main reason why I left my job to be a full-time artist. That was always the goal, but I found myself thinking about my inspirations and pieces on the clock more and more and more. And I'm like, and knowing that sometimes if I didn't sketch it real quick now or write it down now, then I would lose it. I would lose the interest, or I would lose the idea. And so I would say that. And also, when I'm emotionally triggered, to be honest, unfortunately, I think this is true for a lot of artists. My greatest pieces have been made in times of heartbreak, and sadness, despair, confusion, things of that nature. Because I do like to talk and I can get my words out, but I also feel like some things I can't say, and that's why I paint them, to kind of express them in a surrealistic way. Surrealism, or with portraits, things like that. Again, with the pictures that are behind me and other things on my page, you'll see a lot of stories are being told, especially with my newest collection that I'll be releasing in the next couple weeks. So you'll start to see like the stories.
So can you give us an example of some of the stories in your art?
Yeah, so I can walk you through this one behind me. Let me turn the camera so you guys can see me talking, but still get a good look at the painting. So this one behind me in the middle is called Adam and Eve, the foundation of the universe. Let me see if I can get closer for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so this painting, it's a lot of things that are happening. So I was asked to paint this for an erotic art show. They asked us to paint what sex meant to us. And I very much don't like to be cliche. I like to be different, think outside the box. So I was like, anybody could paint, you know, a typical sex scene or something erotic, but I wanted to show, for me, it was about creation and that. And so that's where Adam and Eve came from. So these people are actually trees, and they're coming up from the earth. If you look closer, they're like their roots coming from the earth. It's a man holding a woman, like an afro and kind of like some like locks. And then since it's coming from the earth, I had to put them in space. Again, it's giving a larger than life kind of perspective because the trees are so large. But it's pretty much showing the foundation of the creation of the universe, and kind of that Adam and Eve joining together to make, you know, everything that is, all of us. And I've had some great interpretations from other viewers and like followers as well since I've shared this piece. It's actually going to be going to a home in Alaska next week. I just sold it, so I'm excited for that. Sorry, I'm trying to put my phone back in the stand. But that's an example, kind of like of a story that's being told in one of my paintings, and that is a favorite too. It does glow in the dark as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, some of the parts of the earth and like the universe kind of glow. So.
Okay, so that leads me to a really good question. So I recently just got this phosphorescent paint, and I haven't used it yet. As someone that's used glow-in-the-dark paint, what are some do's and don'ts before I try to apply it?
Oh man, so look, my first time, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not gonna lie to you. I actually, every time I would use it, I would paint at nighttime because I was like, how else am I gonna see this? But first, I recommend avoid all that. Buy yourself a black light. Go to Amazon, the little black light, $10. Boom. Now you can see, because once you paint the areas, it's gonna like be clear. You're not gonna know. You have to just trust it. With the black light, you can see if it's like spotty or if it's all of it or not. So definitely get a black light. That's a do for sure, because otherwise you're gonna be painting blind like me and hoping for the best. So I would say that. I've seen some people mix the glow in the dark paint with the other colors. I still have yet to try that. When I've applied it here and on some other paintings, I just did it on select areas when I was done with the painting. So like the whites and the earth, and then certain galaxies in the background. But that's really the only two things I have is that you can either try mixing it with the paint that you want, but not like too much or overpowers. And definitely get that black light because that will save your life.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely will do that because like I've tried using glow in the dark paint before, but it was really cheap and it wasn't great and it just came out horrible. So I was like, this time now that I'm going to try it on a real painting and make sure it actually looks good.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite interpretation you've heard someone say about your work?
My favorite interpretation someone said about my work. So this one here, actually I have two ones that are my favorite. So I'll give you two about this one and another one about a piece that I sold. I don't have anymore. But for this one behind me, someone told me that I was remembering the way that the universe and everything was like truly created. And then they were like, what if we told you that all the planets were just giant people like balled up, like Titans? Have you heard of like Titans and,
Oh, yeah.
and that mythology? And that's what everything is. And that we did come from like giant trees, and that's just you remembering it. Somehow your conscience was allowed you to remember it. And another one was another Greek mythology story, and I don't remember the name of the people, but they were two people that were, I think they were from different areas, kind of like Romeo and Juliet, and they were in love, and they wanted to be together forever, so somebody granted them like the wish of making them trees so they could be together. And this is a story someone just told me like just last week, so that was cool. And then another one that I sold was I'm gonna describe it to you the best way I can. So it was a person, a woman. She was in space, and she was like, you just saw her face and her mouth was open, and there were like 6 hands coming out of her mouth, right? 6 hands coming out of her mouth, and the hand at the top had a heart in it, a bloody heart, and it was a crown at the top, and it was called Letting Go. It was called Letting Go, and so. For me, that painting was about, letting go of the heartbreak and advancing, what I'm saying, on your journey of healing. And another woman said for her, it was about sisterhood. And because I think she was Hispanic, and she was just saying, like, because all the hands are different colors. And she was just thinking about, like, all of the different women of color, like, from all the different races, and just kind of, like, coming together and uplifting each other. And that was a very different take than what I would have thought. But I saw it and resonated with it. So that was also a favorite for me.
That's a great story. I love that. So your work does seem to have a mythological feel to it. Are you inspired by any mythologies or anything like that?
So I actually love Greek mythology. But ironically, I don't know too many of the stories by heart. Like, it was a lot to remember. But when we did learn it in high school and, like, everything like that, I do remember always enjoying it. And, like, I'm actually a gamer. So, like, I really enjoyed God of War and the stories that game told, as well as the visuals. If I can go back in time, I probably would have went to school to make video games because it's all still art and it's very, very similar. But yeah, so I would say kind of that idea of like, what I'm saying, deities and just being God-like people, because I believe, that we're all God in a sense. We're all pieces and fragments of him. So it's like people say, that it's blasphemy to consider yourself that, but if we're all reflections of him, then it's really not. So I think from that standpoint, like, I like angels and halos and, like, just, again, like, you got the skyscraper type of people. So I can see that connection for sure.
Yeah. I love finding artists that, like, have a like an almost spirit, like, you can tell their work has like a spiritual meaning behind them, and I definitely get that vibe from your work. And I forgot what I was going to say next. Sorry. I'm having a day. So when you are painting something, is there a specific setting that you have to have, or can you paint anywhere? Do you like to have things in a certain ritualistic kind of way?
I think every artist has like a ritual and things that they do to set up their area. But to be honest, I can paint anywhere as long as I have the main things I need, which are paint, brushes, water, a canvas, possibly an easel, but I don't need an easel. Um, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, and like some paper towels, but that's pretty much it. And like a muse or something. But I am the type of person where I really love live painting, and that requires you to be able to move around and have everything you need and know how to transfer it. So from that perspective, I would say that there's really nothing I need besides those things. But always a good vibe, music. Music is essential. Gotta have music. When I'm painting in my own space, I tend to paint to like more like are you familiar with like lofi beats and stuff like that? Like that type of
Oh
music.
yeah.
Yeah, that type of music, but not so calm and cool. Other people will fall asleep and I'll be like good. But when I'm out, like live painting, I like my music to be like club or like up tempo, like keep me on my feet. Like I can still do it to the calm, cool, collective music, but it's I just like it. So really the main thing is music, more than anything. And like I said, I have some other, home rituals, but I have a studio that I've been painting in more, but I paint in my living room. I started off painting in my living room when I had an apartment. I didn't have a lot of space. So it was like, it was just the area.
Hmm. I have the same setup. This is just my living room.
Oh, yeah.
But I was just saying that we had a little comment. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Mm-hmm.
One second, I gotta check the time. Okay, so we got 6 more minutes left. So where can people find your work online? Because I'm going to put this on YouTube, so I want you to be able to get all the socials out there.
Absolutely. So first of all, you can find my work directly on my website. It's www.prismbyshanel.com. Prism by Chanel is the name of my my art company. I probably should say that in the introduction, so apologies. But I enjoy painting with all the colors, and I like to see the world in different ways. So that's kind of where Prism came from. But that's where you'll find it at. The link's also in my bio on my Instagram page, which is also Prism_by Chanel. And Prism is like the rainbow prism, so that's PRISM_by, and then Chanel like the perfume. Same thing with Facebook. I have a Facebook business page, which is also Prism by Chanel Simone, similar as well. You can go to my Linktree, same thing, linktree.com/Prism by Chanel. So it's pretty consistent with the naming. I want to be easy to find and just kind of keep that name out there. But that's where you can find my work, purchase your own prints, get my work on things like, coffee mugs, phone cases, glass prints, paper prints, things like that. And originals too. So
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure that we actually got all your information out there before we had, to cut off the time. So now that we have that out of the way, I wanted to ask you a little bit of a question, I guess personal question. So you mentioned your personal view of divinity is we're all kind of like a fragment of being of the whatever God is.
mm-hmm.
Can you explain how that idea came about to you?
How the idea came about to me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's kind of always been a feeling that I've had personally because of just how I view myself, and the internal feelings I have, while also realizing that I'm not more superior than the person above us. I've also been reading a lot. I am a Christian. And so, but I'm still kind of like learning and unlearning areas of that, because I understand that a lot of things that we're taught, there's an agenda behind a lot of things. So I just kind of want to make my own decisions as far as what I believe and how I choose to live. But I've been reading a book. It's called Conversations with God, because the Bible is a little like heavy for me sometimes. And it's just kind of like a real live conversation with questions we all have. It's kind of hard to explain other than I would just say to read it, in a sense, but it makes sense because I'm a very honest person. I'm very emotionally intelligent and conscious, and I am known for saying the things that people are thinking but are afraid to say. And I think a lot of us have certain feelings that we don't share because of the things that the world tells us as far as that feeling is wrong, or you know what I'm saying, it's not something that we should have. And so one of those feelings for me was just, you know, just thinking highly of yourself. Like the phrase, when people say, you know, humble and be humble, I've come to learn that that phrase is nothing to do with the person. It's like with you, it's really about them. People want you to be humble to make them feel better because they're not able to achieve what you are. And that's backwards. It's like people that are superior, you know what I'm saying, whatever it may be, whatever it's sport, academics, art, music, whatever it may be, speaking languages, like anything that you can think of. And if you celebrate it or you celebrate it, they're like, oh, humble yourself because, you know, God can take it away or other people don't have it. And it's like, that's just your way of projecting your insecurities on me because you're sad that you don't have this and you can't do it. Because when I was coming up, like I would have moments where, you know, I was that smart kid that people would intentionally not pick sometimes because they just felt like, we know you're going to be okay and get it right or whatever. And it's like, you don't realize that, I mean, like, you think about smart kids and nerds getting bullied and typical things, but I wasn't that person, you know what I mean? I didn't look like that. I didn't behave like that. I was just smart. But the jealousies between that being a girl and the cattiness that comes with being a female, just all those things, you know, and then just having those conversations as I got older with people and then being able to hear those conversations just made me realize that, like, we're all like this and it's okay to see yourself as, you know, as this person, because if we all see ourselves as great people, then where's the conflict? You only feel that way if you don't see yourself. It's like a person next to you feels like they're, you know what I'm saying, they're the shit. And it's like, why should that bother you if you feel like you're also the shit? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to give you like the best answer that I can, but that's kind of like how I came to it between that reading, you know what I'm saying, my religion and just my own personal emotions and being like, you know, I'm finding these emotions, but there have to be a reason that they exist.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was great having you on the podcast. Definitely, I would like to set up this again at some point, maybe next year. That way we can have you as like a recurring guest because I really love your work and the way you explain things is so palatable. Like I can actually understand like how you're explaining things. For me, I feel stupid sometimes when I have to ask 3 or 4 questions to understand the first answer. But it was great having you on the podcast, and we'll have to have you on again soon.
I appreciate that, Ezekiel. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. And I will talk to you in a bit.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.